minutes will be allowed for reading of comments at the meeting. Any comments not read during the meeting or during this agenda will still be entered into the public record. We will adhere to all board meeting procedures to the extent practicable. An audio recording and/or draft copy of minutes from the meeting will be available to the public. We apologize in advance for any unforeseen difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. Additionally, we will do the roll call vote when we call for votes. Okay. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move on to the roll call.
Governing Board President Kevin Opalka.
Here.
Governing Board Clerk Denise Reese.
Here.
Governing Board Member Sherry Lowell.
Here.
Governing Board Member Dr. John Sparks.
Here.
Governing Board Member Nicole Warner.
Here.
District Administration Superintendent Dr. Manuel Valenzuela.
Present.
Assistant Superintendent Scott Downs.
Here.
Assistant Superintendent Brett Bonner.
Here.
Chief Financial Officer Lisette Huey.
Here.
Thank you, Betsy. Next, we'll move on to the approval of agenda. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, sir. Mr. Opalka, members of the board, I would recommend at this time approval of the agenda as it was revised.
Thank you, Dr. B. We have a recommendation. A motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay. We'll go around roll call. Dr. Sparks.
Yes.
Denise Reese.
Yes.
Nicole Warner.
Yes.
Sherry Lowell.
Yes.
Kevin Opalka. Aye. Next, moving on to the approval of the minutes. Valenzuela.
Yes, sir. You have in your packet draft copies of the minutes from the regularly scheduled meeting of the board from way back on January 13th, 2021. And after your review and consideration, I do recommend approval as they are presented.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay. Roll call vote. Dr. Sparks.
Aye.
Denise Reese.
Aye.
Sherry Lowell.
Aye.
Nicole Warner.
Aye.
Kevin Opalka. Aye. Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move on to ratification of vouchers.
Good evening, everyone. I recommend payroll vouchers 14, ratification of 14, new payroll approval 17 through 21, totaling $16,676,352.43. Expense vouchers 2131 through 2134, and new expense vouchers 2139 through 2152 for a grand total of $45,278,313.57.
Thank you, Ms. Huey. I hear a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? We'll do a vote. Mr. Sparks.
Aye.
Ms. Reese.
Aye.
Ms. Warner.
Aye.
Ms. Lowell.
Aye.
Mr. Opalka. Aye. Motion carries. We'll move on to item number 3, the superintendent reports.
Yes, sir. Mr. Opalka, members of the board, just a few items to share with a common theme. Even in the midst of this pandemic, our students continue to inspire us and to achieve excellence in many ways. Our schools continue to shine brightly. I'm pleased to share that, first of all, Walden Grove has received a very special honor. They've been recognized by the AP, the Advanced Placement, the College Board, with an award called the Computer Science Female Diversity Award. This is a national award that honors schools that achieve high levels of success in recruiting and helping young women to succeed in computer science oriented AP programs. So in particular, Miss Amy Keek, member of the faculty over there, was highlighted for her roles in helping to advance these goals. I also learned actually today that one of our seniors, Isabel Smith, I believe is the young lady's name at Walden Grove, was selected for the all-state jazz band, which is amazing in the midst of this pandemic, that we continue to find creative ways to adapt and to achieve excellence. That's a very tremendous honor. I don't know if you saw the story in Arizona Central in the Republic in Phoenix. They did a great story about Christian Lopez, who's an amazing young man at Sahuarita High School, a wrestler that was the state runner-up as a freshman last year in wrestling. But the real inspiration of his story is the fact that in the months prior, he'd been diagnosed with a very large, very serious tumor in his head, and had to have major surgery and had a really slow, long recovery to come back, and was still able to overcome and achieve excellence. And if you listen to his coach, Coach Vasquez, and you read the article and the teachers and people that work with him, you just see the character of this young man, his resiliency, his commitment to be the best he can be in all aspects of his life, and just represents what's good about the work we do and about our community and about the future. So congratulations to Christian. We wish him well. And finally this evening, I think we have a video to share. One of our students, Tegan McCarthy, is a young reporter with television station KVOA, the Bear Essential Youth Reporting Program, and has a neat video that I think Amber's going to share with us right now.
News. This is News for Kids.
At a virtual Young Reporters meeting, we got to meet former Bear Essential Young Reporter Emily Jen. She is now a warrant officer in the Army. Jen is training to be a helicopter pilot. In her days as a young reporter, Jen covered a lot of cool stories. She got to meet the world's tallest horse and got to go in a wind tunnel. She told us that she's always loved skydiving and gymnastics as a child. Now she's in Alabama flying helicopters. In the helicopter, you wear special gear for protection. A helmet protects your ears and has an earpiece so you can hear the other pilots. Pilots have to be very careful of thunderstorms, she told us. Jen has been training for over a year. It is very fun and something I have always wanted to do, she tells us. While doing what she loves, Warrant Officer Jen is making a difference in our country. This is Tegan McCarthy from Sahuarita Middle School for Bear Essential News.
Back to you, Dr. Valenzuela.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, thank you, President Opalka. That does conclude my report for this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to governing board reports. Dr. Sparks.
Only I just wanted to relay, I'm just grateful to be here in the group this evening. I think, especially in these kind of trying times, I'm grateful. I've said this before, but I'm grateful to work and live in a community that is supportive and has, is engaged and cares about not only the people and citizens that live in our city as a whole, in our area, our district, much larger than just the entire area we cover, but also that care about students and teachers and being engaged. And I'm just hopeful and grateful we can have that conversation tonight. And I'm sure that, as I've seen in the past, it will be fruitful and positive and a good discussion overall. I'm just glad to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Sparks. Ms. Reese.
I actually want to put out some gratitude towards the middle school counseling staff who, at least for middle school and high school counseling staff, that is actually concurrently running their, at least for SHS, their incoming freshman night. I have an 8th grader sitting in a Zoom right now that is learning about how to be a high schooler and go through the the registration process, which is definitely taken on a whole new look this year. So definite huge gratitude to those individuals that have worked so hard to make sure that that could be pulled off for our 8th graders and as they get ready to move towards their high school careers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Ms. Warner.
I'd like to echo what Ms. Reese said. I also have an 8th grader sitting in a Zoom tonight who is beyond excited to get a glimpse of what it might look for him to be a high schooler next year. And it's relieved a lot of anxiety for him and all the staff members that came together to pull that off. It's just another thing that makes me really grateful to be a part of this board and a part of this school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Wolf.
I just like to echo what everybody else is saying, and also grateful that some of our teachers and staff are starting to get the vaccine, and looking forward to that process of Group 1B being accomplished and giving us even more hope as we move forward. So I'm grateful for our district's involvement in the help and with Pima County Health Department. Thank you so much for stepping in and giving them a helping hand so that we can get this accomplished. No, that's it. That's all my report for tonight.
Thank you. I have nothing to add tonight. I think everybody else has done a wonderful job presenting information. So let's move on to the call to order, because there's nothing on the recognition of community staff, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So the call to public. Ms. Reese.
There are 2 calls to public tonight. The first is from Amy Smith. This school year, you have been following county metrics. Why are county metrics not being followed now, even when COVID numbers are the highest they have ever been? Metrics call for remote learning. Dr. Garcia has stated many times in the last week that our county is widespread. Why force families to make a choice? My children learn better at school, but I don't want to send them when county officials keep saying to stay at home if you don't have to leave your house. Please reconsider. And the second call to the public tonight is from David Lady. Why have a board meeting? Let us just assume that the SUSD board will continue to demonstrate their complete lack of leadership and cowardliness by not physically reopening the schools today, nor provide any immediate plan for doing so. We now approach a year without formal and proper education of our children. Therefore, I am requesting your individual resignations for derelict of duty. And that is it, the call to the public.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. We'll move on to item number 8, new business. The budget report.
Thank you, Mr. Apalco, members of the board. I'd like to ask my colleague, Mrs. Huey, to provide an update. And I think her update really exemplifies the complexities of school finance, and they're only magnified in this year of pandemic. So Lizette, thanks for what you do, and please go ahead and present your update at this time.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to present. Today is our monthly budget report, and in your board packet, you'll find a detailed spreadsheet in regards to each of the funding sources in regards to our M&O budget and where we're at right now at this time. So this is in comparison to December of last year to December of 2020. And so I believe we have a spreadsheet in regards to the chart so that you can see the differences between and how they align in our expenditures. And for the most part, you can see that our expenditures align very similar to where we were last year. Of course, because our budget was a little bit higher in how we were spending some of the monies, depending on what they were, salaries and benefits, they were a little higher than last year. But other than that, it seems very procedure in regards to where we're at this time. We're about half that timeline, and we spend about half of our budget. So I'm hoping to any questions that you may have at this time.
Any questions for Ms. Huey? I appreciate the report and the comparison graphs with the uptick a little in the mid there around the salaries, I think, and some flattening in some other areas where expenses were avoided this year. Interesting that the graph still continues to maintain kind of the same shape. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If no other comments, we will move on to the next item, 8B, public online auction.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Opalka, members of the board. You have in your packet a memorandum with a list of items that have exhausted their useful life and are being recommended for that designation so that they can be put up for public online auction to capture residual value to return back to the district. And I would recommend your approval of that list so that that can be done at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Valenzuela. We have a recommendation. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. Dr. Sparks?
Aye.
Ms. Reese?
Aye.
Ms. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Lowell?
Aye.
Mr. Opalka? Aye. Thank you. The motion carries. We'll move on to item 9, new business, the road back plan. Dr. Valenzuela.
Thank you, Mr. Opalka, members of the board. This has continued to be an ongoing element of our agendas just to make sure that we're communicating regularly in regards to the rapidly changing and continuously uncertain process that is this pandemic. It seems like it's changing all the time. So I'll go ahead and provide you with an update. And because this particular update does coincide with an anticipated change in our learning model, at the end, I will make a recommendation to all of you. So I just wanted to communicate that. So I begin just by saying that we call this the road back. And to stay with that analogy, it's a complex road. It's not an easy road to drive. It's got many hills, it's got many valleys, and it's got many turns, including some turns that are blind. And so it's important that we navigate slowly, carefully, and with much caution. The first thing I'd like to do is just kind of talk about the considerations, the multitude of considerations that we're looking at. These things are not easy. They're not cut and dry. They involve multiple important variables, and they're changing all the time. First of all, kind of an update in regards to the dashboard. The dashboard is one important source. It has been from the beginning. It's not the only source, and no one metric is the only thing that we look at where it's like a switch that as soon as something happens, you flip it and you do something else. We've tried to move with slowness and steadiness and thoughtfulness. But the metrics are one important data source. And really what we're looking at is the complete set, the emerging patterns of concerns, the overall trends in the big context and in consideration of multiple sources. So a couple of notes as you can see there in the presentation. First of all, to state something that is clear and evident is that the numbers are still high. They are still in what the state and county have called the red. However, they are changing. They are, in looking at the trends, they are changing. Just to note a couple of examples, these things have gotten to a pretty alarming level. I mean, I think even last week, the disease infection rates were up to about 850 cases per 100,000. Mr. Downs keeps close tabs and calculations on those things, which change every day. And we're hearing from the public authorities that these numbers are going down, from the media, and there is evidence of that. Tomorrow's numbers, according to Mr. Downs's calculations, are that it will be somewhere in the mid sixes, 660, 670, something like that, which is still high, but it is also a significant shift from where it was just 1 week before. Similar thing with positivity rates. If you look at the state's numbers for Pima County, our county, the last two numbers do show a decline. I think it went from like 23.5 to 21.7 in the last couple of weeks. Tomorrow, again, according to the anticipated data calculations, we do anticipate that it will go down slightly once again. And in addition to that, we hear emerging information that the level of hospital capacity is improving. Now, it's improving from what was almost nothing or very narrow capacity, and that the number of hospitalizations for COVID-like illnesses has been very high. I infer that it's still high, but I also know in speaking with individuals at the county and also in local hospitals that there have been significant changes. I heard from the Pima County Administrator, Mr. Huckleberry, that number is getting better. I also spoke with a hospital executive from one of our local hospitals who confirmed that they have, in the last 30 days, they have less people in the hospital for COVID-like illnesses. Again, they're still high, and there's a lot of very concerning things. But in looking at the overall trends, there are some reasons to be encouraged in terms of the directions. They're not continuing to go higher than 850 or wherever they were before. Another thing we've been looking at locally in Pima County is if you look at the number of cases day to day, because of course the state dashboard is based on data that's a week or two old, but you look at like the daily cases in Pima County, in the last 10 days, 7 of the days the numbers have gone below 1,000 cases, which is still significant, but the previous 8 days before that, only one of the days dipped below 1,000. So you see some of those kind of local signs. And again, the summary of the dashboards right now is they're still high, but there are some indicators that it is flattening and that the trend is going in the direction that we all hope that it's going to go. So we look at the dashboards. And again, my message there is we look at the trends and we look at the full complement in the context of all of the indicators. The other thing we look at is the Council of the Pima County Health Department. These physicians and public health experts, that is their duty, is to give us advice and counsel. And they've been very honest and they've been very available and supportive to us. And the most recent feedback that I've received in my calls was an acknowledgement that the numbers are high, but yet a support for phased return to hybrid instruction with careful continued mitigation and collaboration. In addition to that, the CDC put out a recent report that was done by, I believe, 3 of their scientists that looked at this issue, the complexities of where public health and education kind of interface. And it's actually an interesting study, but the part that I took away was the following. There has been little evidence that schools have contributed meaningfully to increased community transmission, and keeping schools closed could adversely affect students' academic progress. That was from this CDC report. And I would say that they did not issue those findings without some conditions and some themes. One is the importance of strong mitigation, the distancing, the things we're doing, the trying to limit sizes of congregation, the use of masks. And the other thing that actually was mentioned specifically is the use of hybrid learning. We all know that hybrid is not ideal. It's challenging for teachers who have elevated their focus and their just tireless work to make it happen. I know it's not easy. I know it's stressful for parents, and it's kind of in this middle zone where you're not really fully back, but you're not really fully at home. But that it does provide these distancing goals and the redeeming value of helping kids to have some semblance of an in-school experience. So we look at the health department. We also look at our own local situation and our own local efforts to mitigate what we're doing. You know, one of the things that we keep in mind is that we're all as a humanity in this thing. None of us asked for it, and we've got to make the best fit and really try to do the best we can. And part of that locally looks at how we're doing with mitigation. Mr. Downs and Janine Sarnacki and Lucas and George Emerson and our facilities team, this has become job one. We've very diligently and with a tremendous amount of discipline, priority, and focus made this a priority. And that includes the supplies, the masks, the cleaning, the sanitizer, all that PPE, the plexiglass, the frequency of cleaning indoors and outdoors. We've got to make sure that that's done, because that appears to be one of the reasons that in-school transmissions are relatively low. And so the fidelity to that is very, very critical, and hybrid's a part of that. As I mentioned, so mitigation is important, and our ability to mitigate has been very strong. Not perfect, and when we've had bumps, we fixed them, but strong. School transmission is another thing that we've experienced in a way that reflects the professional guidance, which is that in our own county, the percent of documented in-school transmission is about 3%. And our data, if you look at our dashboard, is in that general zone. Of course, it's hard to tell when there's widespread community spread where it originated from, but the general data suggests that a very small percentage is possibly transmitting in the school setting in general, and we found that to be true in our own community. The other thing that's key is the ability to collaboratively manage cases. You know, we've had a great partnership with the UCHC clinic. They continue to help us with testing to the extent that they're able to do that. There was mention about the vaccine. We had a conceptual plan to do vaccination with them. The county determined that they were going to take another pathway. We're now working to make that the best it can be. As was mentioned earlier, every day more and more of our people are getting vaccinated, getting that first shot, starting to build immunity. But nonetheless, our tracking and tracing team has to be able to very quickly deploy when we hear that there's been a case that has touched the campus. Track it, trace it, isolate who needs to be isolated, quarantine everybody who might have been around them as a close contact, and that helps to buffer it and to keep it from taking root and spreading and becoming more impactful on our campus. And that part will continue to be a community responsibility, a shared responsibility among staff, among students, among the home. We've got to make sure we're doing a good job of mitigating and communicating and just doing everything we can to minimize the spread here procedurally. And it's a team effort with the home, with how we communicate with all of us, not just as school people, but as citizens of our community, with the choices we make in our own lives to keep this situation at bay and as far away as possible from our schools so that we can keep educating our students. Another aspect of our phased return is that we're doing it with intentionality in a phased approach, and that's for a couple reasons. We've said slow and steady wins the race. I've said that a lot from the beginning, and I think it applies here. First, we want to make sure that all of these things that we've been doing, that they're in place and that they're working well on a small scale before we make them a bigger or a biggest scale. So that's one of the reasons for the phase plan. The other thing that this does is, as the data suggests that the numbers are going down, we begin with the grade levels where our own data and frankly the data of the county and I would argue beyond suggests that the smaller age populations seem to have less cases than the older ones. In other words, elementary, middle, then high. Frankly, for reasons we've discussed about just the environment and the nature of secondary education, the high schools have been the most challenging. And we've done a good job with mitigation, but they just have. So by bringing them back proportional to these numbers, as foreseeably the numbers continue to stabilize and hopefully not go back up, this seems like a logical sequence by which to follow. And so again, the recommended return is K-5 on February the 1st, 6 through 8 on February the 8th, and again, assuming that things are proceeding accordingly and things are being well managed and not having any unforeseen problems, high schools come back on February the 15th. The next slide really is just kind of an affirmation of this point that it sounds simple, but I think it's important, and that is that these are complex decisions. They're frankly not as simple as just we should send everybody home or keep everybody home or we should bring everybody back. It is complex and it does involve multiple important considerations, and they're not easy and they're changing. So there are no cut and dry answers, but the goal is to continue to move slowly and steadily. I did want to talk a little bit about some of these multiple considerations. Obviously, the management of disease. We want to make sure that we're acting with as much caution as we're delivering education, and that we're managing the variables to the extent that we can. Hence, the procedures, the routines, the mitigation, the cleaning, the sanitation, the hybrid. That's why we're doing it in hybrid. And that's why the CDC report today said that that's still a viable option, is because we want to manage the disease. But there's also other considerations, student well-being, mental health. Mr. Bonner's developed a strong coalition with our student services and community resources like the Better Together Coalition with private mental health providers to provide students with access to small group counseling, to family support, to stress management, because this thing's hitting people hard and it is having an impact. And then, of course, we're now getting emerging data about academic success. I mean, in a nutshell, there's a lot of variables there too, but what we're finding is that for many reasons, for most kids, they're better off being in school to the extent that we can. It's not always possible. It's interesting. We have a program that coincidentally will be referenced in our next presenter, which I'm looking forward to. But it's our Sahuarita Wins partnership, which is our community collaboration with business and leaders from other sectors. But we're having a Sahuarita Wins meeting, and a senior executive from one of the major employers here in our area, we were talking about these things, and he was saying about how a lot of the employees were really struggling with their own families, with their kids, talking about how online learning is really a struggle and it's really a challenge. And I think one word was the kids are just, the family dynamic is involving some meltdowns with trying to navigate this. So, we've We've looked at how many kids are getting at least one F at the secondary level. And thanks to our intervention, accommodation, flexibility, while still maintaining accountability, the number went down from where it was trending. But we had about 20% of the students get at least one F. The previous year was 12. So we know that there are many impactful things that we're dealing with here, and they are complex, and we're trying to find a best fit from a situation that has no easy or simplistic fit. So in a nutshell, and then I'd be glad to, of course, answer any questions. We're trying to make these decisions with multiple considerations. We are looking at the overall directions of the dashboard. We're looking at the advice of people who have the training and the education to give us counsel about this stuff. We're looking at our numbers, our community, our schools. We're looking at our ability to manage the cases that we have. And at the same time, through practice and the fact that we're almost going on 11 months of this, we have refined our practice. We've monitored and adjusted. And my senior staff has given me ongoing counsel that and briefings that on all aspects, whether it's the operational, the financial, the academic programs, that if things have to change even quickly, we have the ability to flip it and to pivot and to go a different direction. We try and just gather all the information and move with intentionality and slow and steady resolve to the next level. And I guess in summary, my hope is that I think there is a light. I mean, none of us, I don't think, is happy or finding any kind of joy in the overall tenor of the last 11 months. It's been very, very challenging, very, very stressful. But we are seeing that there is reason for hope and optimism, and hopefully a light with the flattening of these numbers, in addition to the promise of the vaccine, which in itself has not been without its own hiccups and challenges and rollout problems. And it's not just here in Pima County, as you read across the nation. But there is reason for hope and brighter days. And I think we need to stay strong, and we need to stay together on all this stuff. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for all of your shared efforts, your sacrifice to help us still find joy in the work we do, and to just keep doing this work to the best of our ability, and to keep pushing forward with a common focus of doing what's best for the young people we serve. And with that, I will close out, and glad to talk about any topic or answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Valenzuela. Does anyone have any questions or comments for?
Am I the only one who wants to talk? I think I maybe have some questions, just maybe to clarify, or maybe make sure I understand completely, and also just to clarify some points I heard throughout the week or over the last week and a half. I've heard this kind of underlying theme that we're doing this based on financial reasons. And I think my understanding of that, and if you'd speak to that really, is that we've already, any losses that we might have incurred based on online versus in person, that 5% drop in funding, we've already taken that hit in our budget for this year. So this really has nothing to do with that function. Is that a good statement, Dr. Valenzuela?
Wow, Dr. Sparks, that's thank you for asking that question and making that point. First of all, I think that we'd have to say that, well, as I often say, money is not everything. It is something. We don't say that it's nothing. I'm thankful to have a very smart, very talented chief financial officer that helps me to prioritize our budget to our mission of student success. But I can tell you with my heart of hearts that I'm a teacher, and Lizette knows that, and she knows that the orientation of the way that I make decisions is about what's good for kids. To me, I will tell you that the cohesion of two factors is the core of these decisions. And these are important things. Of course, the safety and the health of children and staff and families and community and humanity. And at the same time, making sure that we're honoring our very important, noble societal obligation to deliver education at the highest level. I would also say about money that I'm encouraged. You never know till it's over with the legislative session up in Phoenix. And I'll ask Lizette to correct me if I'm wrong or to clarify if I'm right. There's in the budgetary proposals that are going on in Phoenix, there's actually talk for this year only of actually providing additional, I would call it grace, to the 5% differential that we would otherwise lose because of the AOI. Lizette, could you add anything you'd like to add to that?
No, you're spot on, Dr. Valenzuela. I know that there is push legislative wise in regards to that 5% just to hold districts harmless for this year.
So I guess in summary, my long-winded answer to that is we're always evaluating the finances, but to me, ultimately, the drive for decisions is the good of kids and staff and community.
Okay, so I just put that out there because I think that's a common statement that people that we're doing this for some financial reason, which is completely untrue from what I understand about the budget. And then I think the next thing I wanted to ask about is I want to clearly make sure I understand that while we have a county dashboard, we have direct communication with the county health director, who has seen our plan to return, has seen our numbers, and it is supportive of our return to hybrid. So this is a professional. I mean, I work every day in a profession, and I defer to people who have expertise outside of my area of expertise. And I've said it numerous times throughout this last year. I understand a little bit about virology and a little bit about public transmission of disease, but I am in no way an expert in that field. Or I claim to be. So I think I refer and defer often to people with expertise, and I would believe the director of public health in our county has that distinct capacity, knowledge, and expertise. Is my statement correct that he has seen that material and he is supportive of that return based on safety and concerns that would impact us as a school district?
Thank you, Dr. Sparks. Again, another very thoughtful question. I would tell you that, yes, from the beginning of the pandemic, our mitigation plans, our return to school plans have been submitted to the county. And Dr. Garcia, Dr. Cullen, and their team have been very responsive, despite the enormity of their responsibilities that have only elevated and become magnified in the course of the pandemic. They've been very responsive. I would also say that I would never speak for Dr. Garcia, but my observation of him is that he is very cautious. He's a public health person. That's what he does. And so he's very aware of the concerns and the disease metrics. But I think as a public health person, my interpretation is that he's also very well aware of these other issues that we're grappling with and the importance of mental, social, emotional, academic well-being of students, and how it relates to being in school. And so it's kind of that balancing act. But I can tell you in the ultimate answer to your question is that he has told us that there is support for this phased return to hybrid learning. And again, he hasn't always said that. He very candidly told me when the numbers were surging heading into the new year that he would recommend that we not come back for the whole month I asked him, when do you think you'd be able to possibly recommend a return to hybrid learning? And he said, not in January. I'd recommend not in January. And we took that to heart. And we made that decision. And since then, I've talked to him, and he has said there is support for a phased return to hybrid learning.
And I think then my next question is just maybe so I understand, do we have a date by which we think that all those individuals that have requested vaccines on our staff, because obviously they were given the right to take that vaccine, so there are those that have chosen not to, but those that have requested it, do we have an estimate of when that might be accomplished?
I will give you my
Estimate.
very general observation, and then I would defer if Mr. Downs would like to add anything. It's really hard to pinpoint a date. I would say again, the large magnitude of people in Pima County, even in our 1B group, that are desiring a vaccine is so large. And frankly, I think they would admit it. They've been honest about it. The logistics of trying to make this happen has not been without its challenges, its bumps in the road, and the need to monitor and adjust. My anecdotal observation is that not only through the county site, but through what I call the amazing resourcefulness of teachers and their ability to find a way. I've talked to some that have gone to Phoenix, to one of those large centers up there, that have gone to walk up sites here in Tucson Convention Center, Banner South, Banner North. I do see anecdotally a growing number every day of staff members that want the vaccine to get it. But as far as when it will ultimately be finished, I do not know. Scott, any other detailed comments that you can make just about that process? Scott's been our senior liaison with the county.
Thank you, Dr. Valenzuela. Yes, I'm usually in contact with Brian Eller every 2 days. And although I don't have an exact date of when we'll have our over 600 staff who is interested in it completed, he is telling me that it is in the current stages of ramping up very quickly. So I'm hopeful through their efforts and our communication with them that within the next several weeks, they will vaccinate quite a few of our staff members. And of the over 12,000 who have requested it from educational institutions in our area, I know that our 600 is on that first list. So thanks to Amber and our quick action to get them our list, we are in a very good position.
Thank you. I think my next question is, as we proceed into February, and I think as we manage and pass through this phased rollout, and we go back to elementary in the first week, and then we go back into middle school, and then finally high school. My understanding is, as we've done in the past, we will continue to monitor that situation, and if things don't continue or can move as we expect them to, that plan will be altered in order to accommodate for changes in that risk factor, whether that be stopping at elementary only or allowing elementary and middle school and not allowing high school. But that just because we make a decision today does not mean we won't adjust and make changes as necessary as we're going forward.
Dr. Sparks, you're absolutely right. And one of the many things that I appreciate about the governance of our board is that tonight I'm going to ask you to make a decision of this as a public conveyance of your collective thoughts. But I've really appreciated, because these things do move fast, and because they are very uncertain, is the trust that you've placed in me. In mid to late December, when a decision needed to be made to shut down for the month of January, we were able to do that very nimbly and very quickly. And so absolutely, for better or worse, whatever the future holds, we will continue to operate with that same orientation and that same commitment to make appropriate decisions, even if they have to be made very quickly.
And I guess I finally just want to, I don't know, this isn't really a question, more of a statement. I think I speak for myself. I know that, coming up to this meeting today and this change and this advancement forward, as we make this decision and talk about it, I know that I find myself apprehensive as I have been in the past. But I appreciate kind of methodical, direct, consistent action. And sometimes that action needs to be quick, as it was in December. Sometimes that action is, as we are right now, kind of methodically rolling forward with a plan based on lots of factors. And I know I speak from a professional perspective when I understand the fear that some of our staff have. In my world, they call it nurse guilt, where nurses often will go to work and place themselves in harm's way because that's what they were trained to do and that's what they're expected to do. I'm very sensitive to that we ask our teachers to return to an environment that they may be apprehensive about. I also know the dedication, heart, and drive of our educators to do that, which they have chosen to do as a career. And I know they love to do it and are passionate about it. And, so I'm sensitive to what we're asking people to do, not only our teachers, but our assistant, all the assistants across all the schools and support staff and cleaning crews, and, to place themselves back in harm's way at some level. And I would hope that as I watch the information as we talk about this, I think there's been efforts to be methodical about that. So we're not blindly running into a decision that this is would be considered, that there are risks involved on all sides. And I think in what I do for a living, I have seen firsthand the impact this has had on not only students, but their parents and the teachers that teach them every day. So I'm grateful for you letting me ask all those big questions. And I hope that no one leaves this meeting with the feeling that all the individuals on the screen don't care, because we do, and I know I do. I know I speak for me, and I probably can speak for all of you when I say that. So, and I think going forward too, at some point today before we finish this conversation, if you could give us a quick update on the rollout of extracurricular activities in that phase, whether that be sports or fine arts, or the extracurricular activities that we find our children involved in too. Just because I didn't hear that necessarily in that update, and you could just give a quick overview of what that's going. You don't have to do it right now, maybe later, but some point in time today. I'd just like to have an update on that. I'll be quiet for now, but
no, sir, I might as well. I'm glad to do it right now. I kind of tend to kind of think very kind of sequentially like that. So I certainly don't want to forget. And it's a very good question, because it is part of the overall complement. One of the uniquenesses and the specialness of the traditional American public school system is that we do provide multiple avenues, utilizing different intelligences and skills and gifts for young people to develop their potential. And our extracurriculars and all of them, whether they're in the arts, in student government, or in athletics, they're a part of that. So to exemplify in a nutshell, to exemplify what we're saying today, which is that these things are not clear cut. They're not easy. Is the whole story with the AIA. The Arizona Interscholastic Association literally a few weeks ago voted 5-4, by the way, to cancel all of the winter sports. And 3 or 4 days later, voted to bring them back. And I think that just speaks to how these things are kind of in the gray zone. And So we've, along with the other major school districts in Pima County, developed a plan to come back. I know the AIA gave a little bit more, I guess, earlier schedule to begin competitions. Like I know that sports are going on around the state right now. We intentionally decided that we were going to ramp up through the phases. They were in phase 1, which is a very limited level of interaction and very, very small groups. And we are slowly moving from phase 2. I think next week's phase 3, or this week's phase 3, and then they're going to start competition foreseeably with many restrictions, including masks during the competition, all of the medication, the temperature checks, the logs, the same types of practices that we had before the holidays. And we're going to continue with the testing protocol that we previously used, and we're going to monitor that week by week. And I would say what we do for sports, we're going to operate with that same orientation and mindset with the other groups, in that the norms that we use for that, we'll use for the others, and we'll move forward and monitor with the same practices for all of those.
Just a quick question too. My understanding, so we'll start that, does that mean we'll start testing again for some of the sports that are more physically contacting in nature, wrestling and basketball? And is that my understanding?
That is your understanding. And again, thanks to the generosity of the good people at UCHC, that is starting on Monday the 1st, because that's when they get to the phase where they're able to, I think they actually start playing next week, where we're going to start testing them weekly. And it's going to be all of the sports, boys and girls, and it's going to be soccer, basketball, and wrestling.
Okay. And my understanding is we're actually we're doing that as a district, and one of the few that has done that, did that the entire time. But we're also, last I checked, the only district still offering regular testing to our staff. Is that going to continue?
Yes, we did that before the holiday, after the holiday, and we're hopeful to be able to intermittently continue that going forward in the spring, to the extent that they have resources available to provide that. Yes, sir.
I mean, they've been very generous and gracious to provide that to us as a district, and I'm very grateful for UCHC's input and really kind of extraordinary efforts to help us maintain that. Because I think that's a point when we talk about how part of the consideration as we move forward in these steps is that we're the only district still offering testing to its teachers and its staff on a regular basis. Doesn't mean that there haven't been a couple that have done it already also, but we're the only one I know of that did it regularly and consistently and have since basically the start of school. And I think that's important. That's part of that mitigation and strategy plan that I hope that people understand. We are truly making efforts to protect and keep safe those that work for us, that we're charged with protecting and educating and leading in this area. I appreciate that.
You know, Dr. Sparks, I don't think we can say too much. And President Opalka, just a little time to make a comment. You mentioned UCHC. They were, and I think it's a fact, so I'm just saying what's a fact. They stood ready and were willing to vaccinate all of our staff members. And, you know, the county whose decision it is, and we respect that, and who's responsible for it, and we respect that they have that responsibility, and we will support them in what they choose to do. But I think it speaks volumes to the fact that UCHC was willing to do that for us. We appreciate them, and I think that represents the kind of community spirit and cohesiveness of community that really makes me very proud of Sahuarita and of our community. At the same time that we had to kind of shift gears in regards to how we were going to vaccinate our own employee team members, they had a need to vaccinate. They were charged by the county. Again, we're all in it together to vaccinate hundreds of senior citizens in a high-risk group, 75 plus. And thanks again to the efforts of Scott Downs, we were able to collaborate, support them. They vaccinated like 600 people between here on the main campus and Sopri. And I believe Scott agreed or confirmed for me that next week we're lined up to bring more senior citizens in here to do more vaccines. Is that right?
That is correct. We're looking like for Wednesday for SOPRI and either Tuesday or Thursday for SHS. And Dr. Sparks, I just pulled up the dates. We have tested our employees 5 times this school year. We started on May 29th of 12-month employees because it was the summer. We tested July 21st, November 18th, December 16th, and our last one was January 6th. So we have tested fairly regular 5 times since school has started. So again, appreciatory towards UCHSC.
Thank you, Dr. Sparks.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments?
I wanted to just clarify with Dr. Valenzuela about the small group counseling and other things that you said the district had worked really hard to implement in its consideration of the overall health of the students and families in our district and their needs being so dynamic. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that's going to look like when the students, how they would access it, and I guess at what levels it would be available?
Ms. Warner, thank you. Very good question. The social emotional aspect, first of all, I would just say it's never ceased. Even during the online, it's never ceased. But in terms of answering your question with more meticulous attention to detail, I'll do better than try and answer it myself. I'll defer to my colleague, Mr. Bonner, who will provide a summary.
Thank you, Dr. Valenzuela, Mrs. Warner, and members of the board. The outreach and continued support services to help the mental health being of our students, staff, and families will continue. As a reference point on our district webpage, under the Road Back section, there's a link that we have posted multiple social service resources that are available within our community and our community region. So that's accurate, it's up to date, and it is posted on our district webpage. In addition to that, we're working with community groups such as Better Together, also working with certified psychologists like Dr. Ballard. Serenity Counseling Services is another group where they're providing flyers and advertising different types of social service programs, whether it's to deal with depression, family unity, communication, anxiety, various themes that a lot of our families are experiencing and our students are experiencing during this pandemic, and also during a time period where we feel so isolated being in a remote type learning environment that will continue throughout now and when we return slowly into a phase-in throughout the school year. We're meeting monthly, actually bi-monthly, with Better Together, where our social service groups come together through Zoom meetings or Google Meets meetings, and we provide updates. And as we get more need and more flyers where these outside agencies can provide counseling services, we're sharing those through our communication threads. So for example, school principals are sending them out in our newsletters. Amber Woods has posted the different types of counseling services on our district webpage. In addition to that, we'll do Facebook posts of different services that are available, but a main library of support services are posted on the district webpage, and we'll continue the outreach as we offer more and more services through Better Together, Serenity Counseling, Dr. Ballard, and the various groups that we're partnering with. In addition to that, our school counselors are very connected. I'm so grateful for their advocacy and their social emotional support that they're providing to their students still. They're meeting with groups, they're doing online chats, they're offering resources. Dr. Mahoney, who is one of our school psychologists in the district, is working with our staff where we're offering support services to staff members, and we've been advertising that as well. So we have strong support systems in place. We want to continue that throughout this challenging time.
Thank you, Mr. Bonner.
Thank you. That was all I wanted to ask. I know that that's been a challenge for a lot of families, and I just wanted to just clarify that there were experts in all the fields, not just physical health, but mental health and all of those that have been consulted and considered in bringing the kids back to school. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I failed to mention that we're also partnering with Arizona Youth Partnership, where they do provide family support systems as well. So we have a lot of experts at the table who have been generous with their time, flexible with their fee schedules, a lot doing free support services, but at the same time at reduced rates or costs. And again, our district is committed to reaching out, advertising, promoting. We do have a full-time district social worker, Joy Cunningham, who I'm in almost daily contact with, who is personalizing contacts for students or families that are in need. And also with Jess Beignet, our Director of Student Services, who helps manage and oversee some of our counseling programs. We're in constant communication to outreach any type of support we can assist our community and our families.
Thank you. Ms. Lowell, did I see that you had a comment? No? Okay. I do want to just address, kind of the elephant in the room around the red metrics, right? And, way back in the beginning of this whole issue, Arizona Department of Health Services provided a, safe return to in-person instruction guide or handout. And there was some initial reopening checklist items, and we're kind of back at that state again. It almost feels like after the holidays, right? And there were a few things that, were on the checklist. Do we have site plans? Do we have mitigation plans? And then one of the boxes was around the metrics, right? And where do they sit? And right now, honestly, they're all red, right? They don't match up. And that guidance was set 9 months ago or so, or maybe it was only 5 months ago. And we've learned a lot since then, right? And now, after that time period, we've learned that under the guidance from the experts in the field, as Dr. Sparks recommended, we defer to their opinions, and they've given us the thumbs up to go forward with opening up in this hybrid model. And that's where we have to put our, faith and understanding with, right? None of us on here are the people putting out this information, right? There's a lot of intelligent people who are doing the best that they can, and they don't even know the right answer for everything. We're, as we've said, we've adapted as we can and adjusted where needed, and we're trying to do it methodically. So the original guidance was to use a certain set of parameters. They have not adjusted those parameters, but they're giving some different guidance in addition to the defined metrics that were originally established, the less than 7% positivity or the less than 100%, 100 cases per 100,000, and those kind of things. We're 6 times that, more than 6 times that 100 cases, but the trend is going in the right direction downward. I think the numbers were high, and we can all speculate why with the holidays and the gatherings that people decided to participate in rather than withhold that action. And we are where we are because of the choices of the community, right? So, the decisions that we make are not easy ones, and it's a constant moving target. We hear the concerns from the community, and much like the call to public, where we have one side that says one thing and one side that says the other, and there's a lot in the middle. And so, understand that whatever decision we end up making, whether it's to have kids continue learning in the distance model or to go back into the hybrid and hopefully eventually back into full-time person, these aren't snap decisions that we make. So That's one thing I just wanted to say about this road back. So if there's no other comments, then Dr. Valenzuela, I think you wanted to recommend.
Yes.
Kevin, can I jump in? I think that Denise told me a statement early on, and she said, our children aren't failing, they're just trying to survive a pandemic. And I think that statement goes a long way for all of us. You know, we're all just trying to survive a pandemic. We're going in a ground that, you know, we haven't traveled before. And so all we can do is rely on experience of the experts. And they have given us sage advice on moving forward on this path. And I trust, based on our actions in the past, that if those circumstances change, we have demonstrated that we can change, you know, in an instant when we shut down. And yes, while the numbers are greater than they were when we took a recess for December, they're not on an upward trend, they're on a downward trend. And that along, I think we all take this responsibility really seriously. And I think we're all just trying to survive a pandemic.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Opalka, President Opalka, members of the board, in consideration of the many things that we've discussed, I do recommend at this time your approval of the phased return to hybrid model as presented. And just to clarify, that's the K through 5th grade returning on February 1st, the 6th through 8th grade returning on February 8th, and the high school, the grades 9 through 12, returning on February 15th. With the authorization of your superintendent to monitor and adjust as might be needed.
I hear a motion. Do I hear a recommendation? Do I hear a motion? Sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Do roll call vote. Dr. Sparks.
Aye.
Ms. Reese.
Aye.
Ms. Warner.
Aye.
Ms. Lowell.
Aye.
Mr. Opalka. Aye. Motion carries. We will move on now to the presentation from Freeport SUSD Program Partnership.
Thank you, President Opalka, members of the board. I'd like to begin by introducing Dr. Brett Kramer, who's been waiting patiently and has been collaborating with us in the last several months. But I will basically set a quick backdrop, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Kramer for the presentation. Since I've been, and I believe, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I believe we have Ms. Jessica Brack on the call as well, listening in from Freeport McMoran. Since I've been in the Sahuarita Unified School District, the Freeport McMoran Company has been one of our strongest champions, supporters, investors, and really impacted, I believe, the quality of services that we deliver educationally and just generally how we've been able to support the community. Jessica and Angie Harmon from Freeport Corporate have asked me a question about how do they know that the investment that they do, which is part of their corporate culture, that they invest in the communities in which they operate. How do we know that that's making a difference and what kind of a difference it is? So we work together to develop an action plan to actually study that. And to that effect, we, through our conversations, which have been going on for about a year, we connected with Dr. Brett Kramer, who has very, very many high credentials. He has a PhD from Iowa State, and he's a very smart guy, as you'll soon hear. But in addition to that, he's one of us. He went through the Marana school system, was their chief accountability officer, had cabinet level responsibilities for research and evaluation and a lot of those things. And he's really great with statistics. So we brought him on board, and he now has his own company that does this kind of high-level analysis and consulting. And he took us through a process to help us answer those questions. So this evening, I've asked him to join us and to provide a concise summary of kind of the process and the findings. So members of the board and community, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Brett Kramer.
Thank you, Dr. Valenzuela. Appreciate it. President Opaka, members of the governing board, district administration. I appreciate you being here tonight with me. I'm excited to share the results of the project that Dr. V mentioned. I'm going to start to share my screen, and hopefully we can get this kicked off, and hopefully you'll be able to see it okay. Does everybody see my screen? I see some noddings of the head. All right, very good. Well, as Dr. Valenzuela said, we started this project about a year ago with Freeport McMoran Foundation, and really the whole idea was to really get to the so what of Freeport Foundation's corporate giving. And so to start things off a little bit, I'm not going to drain every slide, just so you know. I know that I'm gonna hit the highlights, and we can dig into slides if we need to, you know. But I'm going to hit the highlights and really try to point your attention and focus on the areas and the particular bullet points of those slides that are important. And so I think that the one on this was the why. And, you know, I think with all these efforts, you have to start with the why. And the why behind this whole effort is that really the foundation, Freeport Foundation, said, you know, we want our communities, our mining communities to thrive long after mining has stopped in a particular community. And even though these mines might have a life, a useful life of 75 years, they're still looking for that future. And so they want to say, how can the community continue to thrive? How can we build resiliency in the community? And so really that's what we were after with this, and kind of find out then what's the foundation's contribution to that? Is it making a difference? What's the so what of the investment that they are making in the community, and of course the Sahuarita School District, Unified School District, is making as well. So Dr. V's talked about that. He's talked about who was involved. You can see that. We talked about the timeline in general. Just a couple real quick things was the how. So we took a look. We engaged different stakeholders in the process. We engaged Discovery Education. Mr. Brett Bonner was extremely helpful on the data side. So he engaged different folks at the district to be able to provide that data. And I will say, I'm just going to give a little bit of a shout out here to the district, just so you know, and we don't need to be patting ourselves too hard on the back, but I will say that there was a couple different initiatives like this that were ongoing. And this is the one that made it to fruition. And that was solely because of Sahuarita Unified School District's intention to be transparent about the data and provide that data. And I have to give Mr. Bonner a big shout out for that. So what we wanted to do is do all that and then tie that back to then the larger kind of community level, you know, metrics that we have, so to speak. What are some of those community level metrics? What does that really look like for us? I'm going to share this slide with you. Again, not going to drain it, but I'm going to take a look at Freeport wants to get to that community resiliency at the bottom of that funnel. How do you get there? You get there then by building social capital, by making sure these durable networks and partnerships are there, these opportunities for relationships. How do you get to build social capital? How do you get folks to stay in the community? Well, you increase the educational attainment in that community, right? You want to make sure there's mentors and there's coaches and that sort of thing. How do you get to educational attainment? Well, you invest in the pathways, right? The particular pathways to education and starts at K-12. So that's why we share this with you, is that it really all begins when you think about the path to community resiliency. It largely begins with a K-12 school district. Now, there's a lot of other social institutions that are absolutely critical, including faith-based communities, including health aid communities, youth sports activities. There's just a ton. But obviously, for this purpose, we're really focused on the school district, and it begins in K-12. And so why does this matter? Why is this so important? Why is educational attainment so important? Because it leads there. And if you look at some of the goals that Achieve 60 has, they have the biggest one, which you're probably very familiar, is that by 2030, 60% of Arizona adults ages 25 to 64 will hold a postgraduate or post-secondary credential or a postgraduate degree or some sort of degree. And so the foundation's work really addresses that in three different ways. They emphasize high school graduation and then support students through pathways to college, career, and certificates, as well as then developing and expanding partnerships between business and educational providers, educational leaders. And you'll see that we're going to hit on pretty much all three of those here tonight when we move through things. If you do have a question, you probably want to stop and if I need to push it to the end, I'll do that. But if I can address it at the time, I will. So please feel free to jump in if you need to. So that's educational attainment. That's why it matters so much. It leads to social capital, it leads to community resiliency. What does that look like in the state of, what does that state look like in the community of Sahuarita? So what you see here on the right-hand side are some graphs of post-secondary educational outcomes. And then in the green shaded area, that's actually what we determine as educational attainment. The interesting thing about these data, this comes from, again, the United States Census Bureau, the American Community Survey. These are specific to the attendance zone of SUSC. So they're not a zip code. They're not a broader community. They're absolutely, these are measures all within the community of the attendance zone for Sahuarita Unified School District. And what we see is on the right-hand side, we see measures that are indicative of educational attainment. We see them increasing. And on the left-hand side, those lower levels of educational attainment, we see those decreasing, which is what we want. We're essentially shifting from lower levels of educational attainment to higher levels of educational attainment. And that's what we want to see. You know, we talked just a minute ago about some of the metrics, you know, the COVID metrics. We're trending in the right direction. We're certainly trending in the right direction for educational attainment in the Sahuarita community. So that's really good. We're getting there. I think the other thing that I shared with the group, I did a little bit of research on that last bullet point on the left-hand side. You'll see that inflation-adjusted median individual earnings have risen 11% on average over the last 9 years. And that's significant. It's higher than the rest of the state. And we can attribute that largely to, again, increased educational outcomes that lead to then increased, obviously, opportunities for employment and employment at a higher level within the community. So that's educational attainment. What are some other kind of measures that we look at? This is actually from Arizona Progress Meetings from Expect More Arizona. These are really important. These are kind of what broadly speaking, the community of Arizona in general is measuring our progress to really get to a better state, not only of education, but also community itself and employment and that sorts of thing. In the middle of these circular kind of graphs, that is the measure for Sahuarita. And then you'll see the purple line is the average for the state of Arizona. And then the green is then the actual goal where we want to be. And I've already hit on a couple of these. The ones that I haven't hit on, generally speaking, again, are the 8th grade math and 3rd grade ELA. And what we see is that Sahuarita, generally speaking, is at or above those particular levels, and then approaching or really right at then the goal for the whole state of Arizona. So as a whole, the Sahuarita community, the Sahuarita Unified School District is doing well towards these measures and is moving students, again, at lower levels up so they can be successful at the high school level and then have a higher level of educational attainment at some point. If we drill down, and we do this, and we're very transparent about data, and we want to be transparent about data because this is where one of the particular initiatives was focused, was on that K-8 piece, and that was the discovery education, and I'll talk about that. But what does that look like specifically? You're probably very familiar with these data. They're your data, and so it's really important. But one of the things we see is ELA. We saw a big jump, right, between 17 and 18 in years 18 and 19, or the school year 2018 through 2019. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's curricular reasons. There's instructional reasons. Those sorts of pieces. We don't really get into that. We're not going to dissect it into that kind of level of detail. But one of the things we see is we do see a struggle in math. We see this statewide. It's not surprising. One of the things I shared with the committee, again, my prior work in Marana as the Chief Improvement Officer, I did have curriculum instruction assessment and a bunch of other things under my watch, so to speak. And one of the things we see is some of the students have had five different sets of standards in math through the course of their educational career, which is really heinous, quite frankly. And so that's one of the problems that we're seeing, right? We're starting to correct that, I think. But if you think about 8th graders, I think they saw 3 sets of different standards, bunch of different standardized tests. All these, of course, are the AZ merit test. So that's been the same. But there's reasons for that. They're not excuses, and nobody wants to make excuses. Certainly not the least of whom is Dr. Valenzuela. He doesn't do that. We were very transparent about things. But we've got some work to do. So what kind of work can we do? And that's really the idea. Freeport, McMoran then invested in the school district in order to make some improvements in these very areas. And that's what we're going to get to. That's what we're going to see. So when we talk about the two largest initiatives, NIMSI, National Math and Science Initiative, and then Discovery Education. So NIMSI was this broad effort, right? This huge effort, national effort. I think Sahuarita was the first district, maybe the only district, I'm not really sure, I can't remember, to invest in that. So in the state of Arizona, and it was largely aimed at professional development, professional learning. So when we think about breadth, right, we talk about that, we think about breadth, we think about output from these particular projects that Sahuarita and Freeport partnered on. What do they look like? Well, it touched about 4,000 students. NIMSI was a large one. We saw a 300 to 400% increase in the number of students that are taking course offerings at the advanced placement level, which was just significant. I think Mr. Bonner has reported that out to the board. I think you're probably well aware of that. So we saw a lot of our participation. We saw more course offerings. We saw more students taking those courses, taking those AP courses. So that was really fantastic. We see that. We see that at Discovery. Discovery, again, is a science-based curriculum, kind of a supplemental curriculum that's really aimed at again, increasing students' science aptitude. But there's some ancillary benefit to that. And so we know that, math and science really go hand in hand together, but there's also that reading for informational text piece. It's huge in science that can really help bolster a student's ability to read informational text. And although Discovery Education doesn't advertise that as one of the outcomes, we're going to see that that actually was one of the outcomes. But broadly speaking, again, these two projects or partnerships then touched a lot of students. And a lot of times that's as far as an evaluation will go. They'll say, this is the output of it, right? Well, and that's really good. But what was the impact from that breadth, from that reach? And so this then, I'm going to spend a little more time on this slide, but again, not going to terribly great detail on it. But I want to show you that on the left-hand side, we see two graphs. The top graph is the effects from the investment in the National Math and Science Initiative that Freeport made in the Sahuarita School District. The bottom graph then is that for Discovery Education. And on the right-hand side, you'll see there's some text there, and you're all very literate. You can read that, you can see that, right? But what I did, and so just so you know, what we did is we took a look at the course offerings and then across the years for NIMSI. We said, how many possible effects could we get when we look at, for say, the AP scores, and it's a score of 1 to 5, if I'm not mistaken, score of 1 to 5 for the AP exam, right? In literature in a particular year, how did we do? What does that look like? What was the effect of the investment that Freeport made in terms of the amount of professional learning hours and that sort of thing? And so there were 32 instances, and out of those 32, we saw 26 of those have a positive effect, several of which, I think 7, if I'm not mistaken, actually had an effect size that was moderate, which is it's good. That's really good, right? It's not a small effect, but it's a moderate effect. And then for Discovery Education, we saw something similar. Those moderate effects, the threshold between small effect and moderate effect is the same. It's about 10%. So that means 10% of the variability in an outcome measure is attributable to either our investment in NIMSI or our investment in Discovery Education. And so in the Discovery case, we had 46. We had a lot more. We had more grade levels, fewer years, if I'm not mistaken, but more grade levels. In the Discovery Ed program, we saw 31 then positive effects over the course of those particular investments. So that's the impact. That's how deep did we go. Talked about the breadth, over 4,000 students. We talked about the depth. We had substantial, I think, effect across the areas, and in some cases then some moderate effects where we really got some jump. We really saw that it mattered, and I'll talk about that at the end in a little bit. So those are the big messages from that. But we had another initiative. When you think again, if you remember that, sorry, I got another call there. When we think about the slide that I first showed that talks about community resiliency, right? And then there's this whole capacity building piece in the community. Again, those are predicated upon healthy relationships between a school district and a lot of the other players in that district, and a lot just cross collaboration in general from a lot of the different actors. And so one of the things we did, we took a qualitative approach, an interpretive approach to the Sahuarita Wins initiative, the Sahuarita Wins partnership that Freeport has helped develop and that sort of thing, and of course, which Dr. Valenzuela leads. And I'll briefly walk through this and see that that some of the themes that came out, some of the lessons learned really play into one another. So one of the themes that we saw that was individual and organizational trust really enabled a lot of these organizations to walk in unison, where a lot of times, you know, each individual organization or NGO or whatever the case may be, faith-based organization is walking their own path and marching to the beat of their own drum. And so what we see is Sahuarita Wins enabled a lot of these organizations to be able to coalesce around common themes, common interests, and really kind of walk in unison. As one of the folks I interviewed, that was how they put it. And so what did that enable? That enabled then a focus on shared goals, and not just transactional relationships where, well, I'll give you this if you give me that, right? It was actually, we're gonna work together. It may not be in my particular organization's best interest, so to speak, or not best interest, but it's in the community's best interest. So that authentic collaboration, that actually then leads to building social and political capital. We talked about that social capital piece. That enables the group then to garner more support for different collective efforts, to rally the community around those efforts. And that in turn then actually contributes to actual stakeholder buy-in. And that solidifies everybody's willingness to get to yes. And that's what we see, that there's this getting to yes as this mutually beneficial outcome for the community. So finally, when we look at, we have to stand back and say, what was the overall message? The overall message is that the investment that Freeport made in the school district, and again, they made a bunch of different investments within the community itself as well, but within the school district specifically, we can see that it resulted in effects that we would not have seen without that investment. So particularly NIMSY and Discovery Education. So it really did result in better things. Looking ahead, what are some of the different kind of lessons learned that we want to look at? Well, we need to build increased awareness that educational attainment is the responsibility of the community. It's not just the responsibility of the school district, but it's everybody's job. We need to find mutually beneficial outcomes, right, around which the community can rally. We need to leverage these lessons learned and apply them. And then finally, social capital building and community resiliency don't just happen. They're purposeful, they're purposely built, they're intentional. And I think Dr. Valenzuela uses that word a lot. And that's really important. And I think that partnership that Freeport and the school district has built together has helped enable the community to actually build that resiliency. And with that, I'll stop the share, and I'll open it up for questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
I would just like to say thank you very much. I had 2 children who benefited from NIMSY, and I'll tell you, it made a difference. And watching their friends and other classmates, it really does take a village. And in this case, we're so grateful for your involvement and for putting in the time and effort and to value the work that the kids do. And it encourages them. And I personally saw the benefit of that on a small scale. It's great to see it on the big scale and as well, but I cannot thank you enough for what you've done with our kids.
Thank you.
This is Jessica with Freeport. I just wanted to say that we really appreciate all the work that went into this project. You know, we always wonder how those investments are kind of realized at the end of us writing the check, and our partnership with the Sahuarita School District is so valued, and we're really glad to see that those benefits are really going back to the students. So thank you.
And thank you. Your contributions to the district and the community are don't go unnoticed. Any other comments or questions for
Mr. Opalka, the only thing I'd add is, you know, we come to work and we do the best we can, and we believe we're doing good, but data like this really just helps to affirm that when you find common ground and you really are willing to share and to collaborate and to build programs together, that the whole really is greater than the sum of the parts. And hopefully it's additional affirmation for us as we go forward in partnership with Freeport, which we value tremendously. But I think one of the things I heard from Jessica and Angie at Freeport is that it's about exemplifying what is good practice for the greater good of the entire community. And hopefully this lends validation to the expansion of these types of collegial and collaborative partnerships in our community and hopefully beyond. So I would echo the gratitude to Freeport and also to Dr. Kramer, and we look forward to continuing the partnership.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to, looks like nothing is on item 10 for new personnel or new business for personnel. So we'll move on to item number 11, the consent agenda.
Yes, sir. President Opalka, members of the board, I would recommend at this time your approval of the entire consent agenda as it is presented.
I have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
Second.
A motion and a second. We'll go on to roll call vote. Dr. Sparks?
Aye.
Ms. Lowell?
Aye.
Ms. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Reese?
Aye.
Mr. Palka, aye. Thank you very much. Motion carries. And we'll move on to item number 12, the possible future agenda items. Agenda consideration. Are there any anyone that wants to bring forward at this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 13, the establishment of the next board meeting, which will be held on February 10th. And we hope to be in person, depending on the situation, or we'll be virtual. And I do not see, do we have an executive? I don't see an executive session. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
A motion and a second. Dr. Sparks?
Aye.
Ms. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Lowell?
Aye.
Ms. Reese?
Aye.
And Opalka, aye. Thank you everyone for your time tonight, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.